And we've had some weird things happening. But nonetheless, you're tuning in to 92.5 WLSD The Vault. And you're listening to another episode of Real Talk. And it's going to be a fun show tonight. I'm looking forward to the show. I always look forward to the show. And I always look forward to the other people's show. And every show that is on this station, as well as 93.5 WAXM. Always glad to have you around and have you tuning in. So tonight we're going to be diving into a movie from 1998. And I don't know if it's a movie that is well known. I know it's a movie that you've probably heard of. Whether you've seen this film or not, I can't say because I do not know you. But I do want to know you. So tonight's movie is called The Faculty. And it is about, it's about a high school newspaper. It's pretty much like the Breakfast Club of the 90s with a little sci-fi invasion of the body snatchers. When Casey Connor, Harrington High School's newspaper's photographer, that's a tongue twister, witnesses the murder of a nurse and sees her alive again. Later, he decides to investigate the bizarre happening. Now, I gotta be honest, I don't really think that is a great quick synopsis of this film, of what it's about. I don't think it is at all. But that's the synopsis that IMDb had, so that's the synopsis that I'm going to be using. But before we get into that, please go to all of our social media pages. That is the Facebook, Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, The Other People Show. So, sometimes it gets difficult. There we go. Sometimes it does get a little bit difficult in trying to choose which movie we're going to be diving into weekly. And, what makes it difficult is because obviously there are millions of movies and films out there. And I don't always want to fall within past movies, within, just the 90s or, most recent. I like to mix it up. And I like to throw a variety out there. And this is one of those variety type movies. Now, this movie came out at a time when teen movies were coming back after kind of like a long hiatus successfully from the early 90s. And you also had in the early 90s to mid 90s kind of a little bit of the mainstream audience being burned out on, the slashers from the 80s. The excess of that bleeding over into the early 90s made there be a lot of less desirable horror movies out there. And then comes 1996's movie Scream. Scream is written by Kevin Williamson. He goes on to write I Know What You Did Last Summer. He writes The Faculty. He writes a movie called Killing Mrs. Tingle, which they later changed to Teaching Mrs. Tingle, which I actually think hurt the movie, just changing that title. But he was able to put pen to paper or keyboard. He was able to put it together and compile these scripts that had these teenagers at the heart of his movies. But they were not the teenagers from the past. They were sharp. They were witty. They were hip. They knew the horror tropes that have come before them, although themselves they were in one. And that's kind of what a lot of his screenwriting did in such, movies that I named. I think he even helmed Scream 2, possibly even Scream 3 as well. But this movie was The Faculty. And this movie has it's a director that I'm sure that you've heard of. And if you haven't heard of the director by name, you no doubt have seen one of his movies. Robert Rodriguez. Now, Robert Rodriguez came onto the scene, and I gotta be honest, he's a good director, yes. and he excels in this genre, like The Faculty. We'll get to some of his filmography in just a moment, but I do respect the way that he initially got involved in filmmaking, which is the independent way, which is the way that myself, and I, but a couple of other filmmakers I know have kind of made it into opening the door ourselves. But Robert Rodriguez initially sold his body to science for $7,000 to fund his first movie, which was the 1990 movie El Mariachi. El Mariachi. So that was filmed and shot and edited, and he did it all for $7,000. Then Robert Rodriguez went ahead and he did one segment in this movie called Four Rooms. It's a movie, and I rented it once on VHS. And the movie is set up, it's split up into 4 different parts, episodes, if you will. And Robert Rodriguez directs one of the episodes, and Quentin Tarantino directs one of the episodes as well. And that was really the only reason I actually rented it at the time, but it didn't compel me or keep me interested enough to finish the movie, so I never really finished. But he had he directed one of those episodes. He also directed the sequel to El Mariachi, which was pretty much the retelling of the story, but it's called Desperado, with Antonio Banderas and Salma Hayek. Cheech Marin's in it also, as well as Quentin Tarantino. And Desperado is a fantastic action movie and a folklore movie. And then, I don't want to go too much into that because that could be a movie we do in the future. Then you've got From Dusk Till Dawn, 1996, followed by The Faculty. You've got the Spy Kids trilogy, Spy Kids 2, The Island of Lost Dreams, Spy Kids 3D, Game Over. And then you've got Once Upon a Time in Mexico, which closes out the trilogy of the El Mariachi, Desperado, Once Upon a Time in Mexico. Then you've got Sin City that came out, and that was kind of a knock in the face to a lot of people that were really anticipating the graphic novel turned into this movie. And it was one of the best translations that I had seen, even to this day. Sin City was followed by The Adventures of Shark Boy and Lava Girl, which introduces us, I don't know if it's for the first time, but I think for the first time on the big screen, Taylor Lautner. He is Shark Boy. You've got the 2007, kind of like a double build with Quentin Tarantino, The Grindhouse. Robert Rodriguez's portion was called Planet Terror. Quentin Tarantino's portion was called Death Proof. And Planet Terror, I've not watched it in quite some time. Maybe it could be a decade, to be honest with you. And it's one of those movies, it's a schlocky B movie, but it's made at the highest production value. And it's got a lot of stars and names that you would know. That was popular then and was popular now as well. We've got Machete, another Spy Kids movie, Machete Kills, another Sin City, and Alita Battle Angel was 2019. So Robert Rodriguez really did, from 1992 until 2019, he's directed movies almost every single year. I mean, he's won a couple years now and again, a couple of years between Sin City to Alita, a 5-year gap. But Robert Rodriguez specializes in this type of film. And this film was one that came out, it was early on. It was his 6th film. Well, really 5th. And if you look at it logically, really only 4, because one was the episode in 4 rooms, and one was the very independent $7,000 funded El Mariachi. So he's going into this with, guns blazing, because this is going to be a fun movie. He's thinking. And why wouldn't he think that? I remember when this was coming out, the hype about this movie, and as I was doing some research as well, the hype about it from the cast. You've got the cast. We'll get into the cast in a moment, but you've got an up and coming of who's who of young actors and actresses that were known, but they hadn't, what you would say, broke onto the scene quite yet. And they were led to believe that this movie was going to be one of the last times they were going to be able to walk down the street without getting recognized. That was the load and the weight and the what the studio and everyone around expected from this film, for it to live up to the Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer, and these teen, She's All That. That was another big film around that time. So they were trying to tap into a couple different genres here, and this was an ensemble cast, and that's what they do. So basically, you've got these. We'll get into the story. Let's see. Is there anything else I wanted to say here? Oh, yeah. I did want to say a little bit. There's a couple of facts here. And a couple of facts that, I don't know, just fun little facts, little information that you might want to know that you didn't know that you wanted to know. A lot of the filming was done in high school in Lockhart, Texas. The football team was used and the city was told to show up for the football game, and they were given fake t-shirts to wear in the stands. So this does take place a lot of time at a high school. And it was a high school in Lockhart, Texas. And, that's how a lot of times is a fun way to kind of get involved if you want to see how movies are made and you want to be kind of in the front lines. Well, not really the front lines because you're an extra, but when you're an extra, you're invited on set and you get to see, or it could be on location, whatever it may be, and get to see firsthand kind of how movies are constructed. And it's different considering the budget, the size, but this was a pretty decently sized movie and budget, and it was backed by a major Hollywood studio. On this set of the film, Harry Knowles first got wind of Peter Jackson making The Lord of the Rings into a movie. And Harry Knowles urged Elijah Wood to go for it, even though the actor had never read any of the novels. Elijah Wood did go for it. He ignored the news that Jackson was largely casting British actors, and he videotaped his own audition and sent it to Peter Jackson. So had Elijah Wood not been in the movie The Faculty, he probably would not have been cast as Frodo in Lord of the Rings. So for the Lord of the Rings people out there, you have The Faculty to thank for him playing Frodo in Lord of the Rings. And I will say, I have watched the Lord of the Rings movies, but I've only watched them once each when they came out. And it wasn't, I liked them. They were fine. They were just long. And it's sometimes hard. This was the film debut of Jordana Brewster. And I didn't realize this at the time, but now being able to go back and look at the IMDb and past filmography, she didn't. But she fits right in with the rest of this cast because a lot of the faces are faces, especially at the time and even now. I know them. I know them. I know her. I know him. I've seen him in things. But Jordana Brewster, and if you don't know her, she's in the Fast and Furious franchise. She was also in Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning as well. The drug test scene in the movie is an homage to the blood test scene in The Thing from 1982. Those of you that have seen this movie know there's one particular scene in the movie where the crew is trying to find out who amongst them is a being, an alien being, disguised obviously as a human. And there's a similar scene like that in the movie of The Thing, but it's a blood test. In this movie, it's kind of like it's like a caffeine drug that Zeke, played by Josh Hartnett, kind of sniffs, and that's what they're referring to in this scene. Famke Janssen revealed in 2016 that she has never actually seen the film, partly because she didn't want to see her character's on-screen fate. And Famke, she's been in multiple things. She was in Goldeneye. She was in a great Harvey Keitel, Timothy Hutton movie called City of Industry. She played Jean Grey in a couple of the X-Men films. So she's kind of been a staple in acting for many, many years. Let's see if there's anything else. Here's another little tidbit. When the crew, they're discussing the aliens, and they mention a master, but the first person to refer to a queen and continually refer to her as her is Mary Beth, the character Mary Beth, which is foreshadowing herself as the, spoiler alert, queen. So if you watch the movie, take notice that Mary Beth, she's the new student that comes to the school. She's the only one within the group that mentions that the alien could be considered and referred to as a queen, when in reality she is the queen alien herself. I guess it won't make sense if you've never seen the movie, but if you've seen it, you'll understand. The budget of this movie was $15 million. So this was $15 million in 1998 money. So you were able to accomplish a lot with that. You know, nowadays, $15 million, yes, obviously is still a lot of money. But when you're talking about the budgets that a lot of the movie studios use now, it's not the same. Now studios go for more, let's make a 4 or 5 big tentpole movies. That's the Marvel movies. That's the Jurassic Park movies. That's the the Mission Impossible movies. That's these big Hollywood staple movies that cost millions, hundreds of millions. When back in the 90s, 80s, and every other point in time other than the last 10 years, there was an abundance of mid-level or low-level budgeted movies that played theatrically like it should be. And The Faculty is one of those movies. So it cost $15 million, and it made around $40 million in America. Worldwide, I've not been able to find exact statistics. A couple things have said like 64. Another thing said 84. So I'm not really sure. But what is the fact is that The Faculty was in fact a semi-successful financial movie. It wasn't the big hit that Scream was, which Scream made over $200 million worldwide on about an $11 million budget. This one had 15 and made about $40 to $80 million worldwide. Still good results, but not exactly the results the studio was hoping for. Let's get into a little bit of the plot. A little bit of this plot kind of relies on a group of students in this school. You've got, we'll go through the cast as well. You've got Jordana Brewster as Delilah, Chloe Duvall as Stokely Mitchell, Laura Harris as Mary Beth, Josh Hartnett as Zeke, Sean Hetzoy as Stan, Selma Hayek as the nurse, Famke Janssen as Miss Burke, Chris McDonald, who is Shooter McGavin, he's Casey's dad, Robert Patrick, who plays the T2, is Coach Willis. The debut film of Usher Raymond, he's Gabe. Jon Stewart from The Daily Show is Mr. Furlong. Mr. Edward Furlong, which is a homage to Eddie Furlong, Edward Furlong, who plays John Connor in Terminator 2, and Elijah Wood as Casey Connor. Sorry. So basically, they are the students begin to realize that the faculty and the teachers at the school are acting odd and bizarre, and they soon, after piecing together little by little evidence, realize that somehow their teachers have been taken over by some kind of entity. Not paranormal as in like an alien. Something has taken over the teachers' bodies, and the teachers are trying to take over the bodies of everyone through little tactics like getting the kids to come into the nurse's office so they can do a physical and look in their ears, and they're able to transmit. I'm not really exactly sure what it is, but they're able, maybe some glop or goo, something alienous. They're transferring it to infect the others. So basically, you've got a small cast of characters that realize what's going on, and their main objective is to stay alive. How are we going to deal with this? What are we going to do? And what can we do? I mean, that's basically the objectives of the students that do know. And within that, the build-up is, you've got the football player who really doesn't want to be on the football team anymore. You've got, the nerd girl, you've got the goth girl. So you've got the cliques and the cliches on purpose, though. And it does work well within this settlement, or within the scene, I guess I could say. Characters, just like I named, you don't have any breakout stars. You don't have any huge, box office draw names was just one name. But you do have a list of actors and actresses that hold their own. A lot of these are very, like I said, this is Usher's first movie. But considering everyone, everyone's young for the most part, and from what I was watching and research, it was a lot of night shoots, and everyone seemed to have a great time making this movie. Everyone was open to new ideas. Robert Rodriguez felt the energy and was so fun, so ready and willing to work with his cast and make their intention was to make a great, entertaining invasion of the body snatchers kind of movie, and they kind of did do that. They kind of pulled that off in a way. So scenes, we got a favorite scene or a least favorite scene. I got to think about this. One of my favorite scenes is there's a scene where it's kind of I don't know. I don't know if there's one scene that I can pick out that I could say this would be a standout scene that I really, really like. Now, I do like the way that the characters are introduced, because the characters are introduced within the opening couple minutes of the movie, but it's like a freeze frame for a split second with their name going across the screen in red lettering. Zeke, Danielle, Stokely, Stan. It's like that, and it's a cool effect. And there's a couple different shots that are really cool, camera angle, but there's nothing that would stand out as far as scene-wise. That's anything all that, I don't want to say special, but it's nothing that you haven't probably seen before. I will say that. But I do remember when I first watched it when I was a teenager, I do not think that I thought it was Mary Beth. Spoiler alert, it's Mary Beth. But I'm not sure, but I vaguely remember being a little bit surprised by that. Least favorite scene on the rewatch. It was a little harder to get through than I thought because it was a little slower paced than I remembered. Like I said, I'd seen the movie when it came out. I'd seen it maybe about 10 years after that. And then I saw it, probably 10 years ago. And then I saw it again today. Last night and today. So it was the first part was character building. And I think me going in thinking about it was going to be nothing but nonstop action and stuff like that. And when it wasn't, it was a little bit slower than I'd originally anticipated for it to be. But that doesn't diminish and say it's bad, because it's not in that regard at all. it just wasn't as fast paced as my mind had remembered. Next, we've got the score and the music. I've been sprinkling the show a little bit throughout with the score and the music. And this has pretty much a who's who of rock songs from the late 90s. We'll listen to a few. I mean, you've got the Offspring, you've got Creed, you've got Soul Asylum, Garbage, Flick, Sheryl Crow, Sean Mullins, Oasis. You've got a remake of Another Brick in the Wall Part 2. And this kind of represented that these kids were like the MTV generation. So the music kind of reflected that as well. And you can hear it by, you know, the Harder Sound soundtrack. So yeah, I would say the music, you know, it does fit. It does kind of take you back into that point of time, especially if you knew a lot of these bands. But it kind of does put you in that late 90s feel. And I think every decade has the great music, but you can tell what decade for the most part you're listening to just without even saying what it is. And I think the soundtrack really does show that. But it's not your typical soundtrack where it has like a score. It's more these songs that sprinkle throughout the movie. Originality, you know, this isn't one of the most original movies that I've ever seen. It's a fun movie. It's not that original in the way it's told. Nothing is all that original about it. That you were able to get this cast of characters together was pretty original. And it was pretty cool because you've got, like I said, you've got name after name on here that went on to bigger, I don't want to say bigger and better things, but more diverse things. And who would be the biggest star in this list? Josh Hartnett, Salma Hayek, you got Jon Stewart, Elijah Wood. So, you know, it's a who's. The poster, it's an okay poster. You know, I had read about the movie, and posters rarely ever make me want to go watch the movie or not watch it. I just think it's a nice addition. Oh, they did a good job on the poster. It represents the movie well, or they didn't put much effort into that poster. This movie is kind of, the poster is more, I mean, there's a couple different ones, but the original poster was that you had the main 6 leads, Josh Hartnett, Jordana Brewster, Elijah Wood, the rest of the crew. And then you had the high school in the back and kind of like this light coming down from the sky, which is kind of representing an alien, or I guess a spaceship. So it's not 100% clear that that's what it is. But if you know the movie, you know that's what it is. But if you had never heard of it and it was coming out, it might not represent what the movie is 100%. So I would give the poster maybe a B minus or so. And last on our list tonight, would I recommend this movie to the audience tonight? You know, I've thought about that a lot of the day today. That's how I've spent my day, thinking about if I'm going to tell everyone to watch the movie. It's on Freevee. So I would say this. You know, if you've never watched the movie and you want to go into it's not a serious movie. It's not really got any scares, but it's fun. And, you've seen these actors and actresses time after time. It's like I said, it's got a good soundtrack. And it's a good, 85, 95 minutes long. I think it's 96 minutes, hour and a half. Give it a try. I'd say go ahead. And if you don't like it, you can cut it off. And it's not even like it's free.
You got to watch it for free anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the faculty.
Oh yeah.
Whoa. I had the microphone a little hot there. But yeah, thank you all for tuning in tonight for another episode of Real Talk. Not sure what we're going to get into next week. But in the meantime, go to all of our social media. That is the Facebook, Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. Stay tuned for in just a moment for another episode of The Other People Show. See you in just a few.